1. 2,000 caterpillars can eat a plastic bag in 24 hours. 2. Fat from trash. How waxworm caterpillars turn plastic into body fat. 3. Waxworms, the plastic-eating caterpillars and their health consequences. 4. Plastivore insects, the future of plastic pollution solution. 1. 2,000 caterpillars can eat a plastic bag in 24 hours. What if a single day could undo centuries of plastic waste? Picture this, 2,000 tiny caterpillars, no bigger than your thumb, chomping through a stubborn plastic bag in just 24 hours. That's not a sci-fi fantasy, it's the real-world potential of Plastivore waxworms, the caterpillars of the greater wax moth. These little creatures might just hold the key to tackling one of Earth's most persistent pollutants, polyethylene plastic. Polyethylene is everywhere. From grocery bags to food packaging, it's the most produced plastic on the planet, with over 100 million tons churned out annually. Yet, its durability is a double-edged sword. While it's fantastic for human use, it takes decades, or even centuries, to break down naturally. Enter Dr. Brian Cassone and his team at Brandon University, Canada. Their groundbreaking study reveals that waxworms can devour polyethylene at an astonishing rate, reducing a plastic bag to fragments in a day. But here's where it gets controversial. How do we scale this without unintended consequences? The magic lies in the waxworm's gut bacteria. When they munch on plastic, their bodies metabolize the polyethylene into lipids, essentially, body fat. Dr. Cassone likens it to humans overeating steak. The excess fat gets stored instead of burned for energy. However, there's a catch. A diet of 100% plastic is a death sentence for the worms. They wither away within days, their bodies unable to thrive on synthetic sludge alone. But Cassone isn't discouraged. His team is exploring a solution, co-supplementation. By feeding the worms a mix of plastic and nutrients like sugars, they could not only keep the caterpillars alive but also boost their efficiency. This research opens two exciting pathways. First, imagine mass-rearing waxworms in a circular economy system, where they process plastic waste while being sustained by nutrient-rich supplements. Second, scientists might replicate the enzymes and bacteria in the worms' guts in labs, creating industrial tools to break down plastic without the need for live insects. And there's a bonus. The leftover insect biomass from farming waxworms could become a protein-packed food source for aquaculture, turning waste into value. But here's the part most people miss. Waxworms have a natural diet, beeswax. In the wild, they feed on honeycombs, and a sudden surge in their population could spell disaster for bee colonies already under threat. If we scale up waxworm farming, are we risking another ecological crisis? Dr. Cassone acknowledges this concern, noting that the moth's reliance on beeswax could backfire if their numbers explode. Could we inadvertently harm pollinators while solving one environmental problem? That's a question worth debating. Past studies have explored plastic-eating fungi and bacteria, but scaling these solutions remains a challenge. Waxworms, with their rapid consumption rate, might offer a faster alternative. Yet, their success hinges on balancing innovation with ecological responsibility. And this is the part most people miss. The potential of these tiny caterpillars isn't just about their plastic-eating power, it's about how we choose to use it. So, here's a thought to chew on. Are we ready to embrace a future where insects clean up our plastic mess, or do the risks outweigh the benefits? Let us know in the comments. Should we bet on these little plastivores, or is there a bigger, more sustainable solution waiting to be discovered? 2. Fat from trash. How waxworm caterpillars turn plastic into body fat. Imagine if tiny caterpillars could help solve one of the biggest environmental crises of our time, plastic pollution. It sounds almost too good to be true, but scientists have uncovered a surprising ability in the larvae of the greater wax moth, Galleria melanella. These caterpillars can actually break down common plastics like polyethylene, PE, and transform them into body fat. But here's where it gets even more fascinating, and controversial, because this discovery could revolutionize how we tackle plastic waste. Yet it raises questions about the practicality and ethics of relying on insects for such a task. This breakthrough came from a research team at Brandon University in Canada, led by Dr. Brian Cassone, a professor specializing in insect pest and vector biology. Their studies showed that approximately 2,000 waxworms could completely degrade a polyethylene plastic bag within just 24 hours, a speed that's astonishing compared to the hundreds of years it usually takes for plastic to decompose naturally. This finding was presented at the Society for Experimental Biology annual conference held in Antwerp, Belgium, on July 8. Dr. Casson pointed out that the number of waxworms needed for this process might be reduced by adding feeding stimulants such as sugars, hinting at ways to optimize this natural plastic breakdown. But why does polyethylene pose such a huge issue? This plastic type is manufactured in volumes exceeding 100 million tons yearly, largely because it's used in everyday products. Unfortunately, its durable chemical structure makes it incredibly persistent in the environment, contributing significantly to global pollution. What's truly remarkable is that these waxworms don't just nibble away at the plastic, they metabolize it, converting the polyethylene into lipids, which they then store as body fat. Dr. Casson explains this biological process by comparing it to human fat storage. When we eat foods rich in saturated and unsaturated fats, our bodies store the excess as adipose tissue, rather than burning it immediately for energy. This analogy helps demystify a complex chemical transformation that's happening inside these tiny creatures. The implications of this discovery are exciting but also complex. Using insects like waxworms to degrade plastic might offer a novel and natural approach to addressing plastic pollution, opening doors for new bioremediation technologies. However, an important caution arises. A diet consisting solely of plastic is detrimental to the caterpillar's health, causing them to lose significant weight and shorten their lifespans. This means that while waxworms can digest plastic, they can't thrive on it alone, challenging the feasibility of this method as a standalone solution. Interestingly, waxworms are not the only insects showing promise in this arena. Other species such as mealworms, Tenebrio molitor, superworms, Zophobas morio, and even cockroaches, order Blatodia, have demonstrated potential for plastic degradation, hinting at a wider biological toolkit nature might offer for combating pollution. Here's the part most people miss. While this natural biodegradation process sparks hope, it also raises ethical and ecological questions. Should we mass rear insects to consume plastic waste, potentially impacting ecosystems or insect populations? Could this method scale safely and economically? More research is needed to fully understand the mechanisms, optimize the process, and assess any unintended effects. What do you think? Is turning plastic waste into insect body fat a groundbreaking step forward, or are we venturing into ethically murky territory? Share your thoughts and join the conversation, because the future of plastic recycling might be creepier, but definitely not creepier in a bad way. 3. Waxworms, the plastic-eating caterpillars and their health consequences. Here's a shocking twist you never saw coming. Some tiny caterpillars are chomping through plastic like it's a 5-star meal, except this diet is literally eating away at their lives. Ever wonder why the very hungry caterpillar never mentioned plastic? Well, the real story is way more complicated than a cherry pie. Meet the waxworms, the unsung heroes, or villains, of the plastic pollution crisis. These little creatures, the larvae of the greater wax moth, have a secret superpower. They can break down polyethylene, the stubborn plastic that lingers in landfills for centuries. But here's the catch: while they're busy digesting our trash, they're also shortening their own lifespans. Back in 2017, scientists first discovered these plastic-munching marvels, but a new study is diving deeper into the trade-offs. Researchers want to know if waxworms could be the eco-friendly solution we've been waiting for, or if their fragile biology makes them more of a cautionary tale. Picture this: 2,000 waxworms could devour a plastic bag in a day, but only if they're given a little help. Dr. Brian Casson, a biology professor at Brandon University, explains that adding sugars or other nutrients can boost their efficiency. Yet, the bigger question remains: can we trust these tiny eaters to clean up our mess without sacrificing their survival? The secret to their plastic-punching power lies in their saliva. Waxworms produce enzymes that chemically break down polyethylene, a feat that's baffling scientists. But here's where it gets controversial. These same enzymes evolved because waxworms once feasted on beeswax, a substance surprisingly similar to plastic. It's like nature's own recycling system, but with a twist. The study reveals something even more surprising. When waxworms eat plastic, their bodies convert it into fat, kind of like how we store extra calories. However, this isn't a healthy lifestyle. On a plastic-only diet, waxworms don't last more than a few days, and their bodies shrink dramatically. So, does this mean tossing waxworms onto plastic islands is a bad idea? Absolutely. But here's the part most people miss: the researchers aren't giving up. They're exploring ways to harness these creatures' potential without putting them at risk. Imagine a world where waxworms are farmed in controlled environments, their plastic-eating habits optimized for cleanup. Or what if scientists could replicate their enzymes in labs to create a synthetic solution? The possibilities are endless, but so are the ethical dilemmas. Should we rely on insects to fix our pollution problem? And what happens if we disrupt ecosystems by mass-producing these larvae? The study also hints at a circular economy, using waxworms to process plastic waste, then repurposing their biomass as fish food. It's a poetic cycle, but is it practical? The research will be presented at the Society for Experimental Biology conference in 2025, where experts will debate the future of this approach. One thing is clear: waxworms are rewriting the rules of environmental science, but will we be ready to follow? Share your thoughts. Do you think waxworms are the answer, or are we just swapping one problem for another? For Plastivore insects, the future of plastic pollution solution. Imagine a world where insects could help solve one of humanity's biggest environmental crises: plastic pollution. Sounds like science fiction, right? But here's the twist: science is showing us that certain bugs might just hold the key to breaking down the mountains of plastic waste choking our planet. And the best part? They're not just any bugs, they're waxworms, the larvae of the greater wax moth. Every year, humans churn out over 100 million tons of polyethylene plastic, a material so durable and chemically resistant that it can take centuries to break down naturally. This resilience is what makes plastic so useful in products like shopping bags, electrical components, and packaging materials, but it's also what makes it such an environmental nightmare. Enter Brian Cassone and his research team, who are exploring a groundbreaking solution inspired by nature itself. Back in 2017, another group of scientists made a fascinating discovery: waxworms, which normally feast on honeycomb, could also munch through low-density polyethylene, LDPE, a common type of plastic. These caterpillars didn't just nibble at the edges, they actually digested the plastic, breaking it down into simpler compounds within 24 hours. Researchers theorize that this ability stems from the chemical similarities between honeycomb and plastic. Both contain long-chain hydrocarbons, which the waxworm's digestive systems seem uniquely equipped to handle. Inspired by these findings, Cassone and his colleagues decided to dig deeper. Could waxworms be harnessed as a sustainable weapon against plastic pollution? To answer this question, they conducted experiments to explore how consuming plastic affects the health and survival of these tiny creatures. What they found was both promising and challenging. On one hand, waxworms are incredibly efficient at breaking down plastic. In fact, around 2,000 of them can devour an entire polyethylene bag in less than a day. On the other hand, there's a catch: feeding exclusively on plastic isn't exactly healthy for the worms. Without additional nutrients, they tend to lose significant body mass and rarely survive more than a few days. This raises an important question: can we find a way to supplement their diet so they thrive while still doing the heavy lifting of plastic degradation? To tackle this issue, the team turned to innovative strategies. By mixing sugars and other feeding stimulants with LDPE powder or embedding nutrients directly into plastic films, they discovered that waxworms could metabolize the plastic, converting it into lipids that get stored as fat reserves. Think of it like eating a rich steak: if you consume too much saturated fat, your body stores it rather than burning it immediately. Similarly, the waxworms convert plastic into energy reserves, though this process comes with risks if their diet lacks balance. But here's where it gets controversial: is relying on insects to clean up our mess truly the best approach? Some critics argue that focusing on bioremediation solutions like waxworms might distract from addressing the root cause of the problem: our overproduction and overuse of plastic. Others wonder about the potential unintended consequences. For example, what happens to the microplastics left behind after the waxworms break down larger pieces? Do they pose new environmental hazards? And what about the ethical considerations of using living creatures as tools for waste management? Despite these concerns, the researchers remain optimistic. They envision a future where waxworms could play a vital role in large-scale plastic remediation efforts. One idea involves spraying nutrient supplements onto plastic waste to make it more palatable for the worms. Another intriguing possibility is using waxworm biomass as feed for fish or other animals, provided the insects remain nutritious despite their unconventional diet. Why waxworms specifically? Beyond their impressive appetite, these caterpillars are ideal candidates for laboratory work. They reproduce quickly, require minimal space relative to their biomass, and adapt well to controlled environments. Plus, let's face it, they're voracious eaters, making them perfect little recyclers. Still, many questions linger. How environmentally friendly is this method in the long run? Can we scale it up effectively without creating new problems? And perhaps most importantly, should we rely on nature to fix the messes we've created, or is it time to rethink our relationship with plastic altogether? So, dear reader, what do you think? Should we embrace waxworms as eco-friendly heroes, or does this solution raise more red flags than green ones? Share your thoughts in the comments below.